ตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะพุทธังธัมมังสังฆังนัมมัสสามิ One of the comments we hear a lot as monks is from people who feel that somehow the world is worse off than before, more confusing, more problems, more troubles. And so they like to come and tell monks that. Perhaps it's an expression of our natural awareness of the insecurities of life, but perhaps these days it's more heightened, more extreme, because we are fed so much information all the time from media, other people, and so on. The communications and technology allows us to hear all kinds of news and information from around the world, which can give us that sense of the world being in a mess, problems. Of course, to hear the news, hear information is often very helpful, especially at this time with global pandemics and economic problems and so on. But we also have to be mindful of our reactions to it, to this news and information, and this sense of insecurity, which is kind of there at the back of our mind and nags us, comes up as thoughts and feelings, emotions. And particularly if you're in a position of responsibility, say you're a parent, a mother or a father, or you have a group of people under your responsibility, so you're a teacher, or you run a business, or a part of a business, or so on. You might have even this heightened sense of insecurity, because not only are you concerned about your own welfare, but the welfare of the people you're responsible for. This is one of the common experiences of the modern age. Feelings of insecurity, anxiety, but also at the same time, as we practice the Dhamma, practice mindfulness, meditation, and learn to contemplate the Dhamma and reflect on it, we can see perhaps quite quickly how some of those feelings of insecurity drop away when we are more mindful. And particularly if you practice any form of meditation, as we have just been doing just now, after a while of putting effort into paying attention to the in and out breath, using that as a focus for your mindfulness, you might find that sense of insecurity does subside, and you can feel some inner peace, feel more at ease within yourself. And this is a very valuable experience for us. It's a valuable insight, because it's pointing the way to inner peace and inner security, and something that is really reliable. One of the phrases we chant regularly, if you do the morning and evening chanting that we do in the monastery, if you do that at home, have the chanting books and you learn the English translations of the Pali, you'll know that we chant that the Dhamma is the safe, secure refuge of all beings. And what is the highest or best part of the Dhamma is Nibbana, the deathless, the unconditioned, the highest happiness. So when we're practicing mindfulness and learning to pay attention to our body and mind in the present moment, we're bringing our mind to the Dhamma. So naturally we will feel better, safer, more secure. But this is an internal feeling, an internal experience, and it may be matched by what's going on around us. So I think many of you at the moment are at home watching this on Zoom or other media. So when we're at home, we often feel fairly safe because that's our place, we know it, and we manage it. So maybe the external conditions are fairly secure and safe for you at the moment, but even more important is the internal feeling of safety and security you get from inclining your mind and bringing it closer to the Dhamma. And you might notice that most clearly is when you are in a situation that's not safe or secure or peaceful on the outside. So say when you're traveling from one place to another, going into a busy shopping mall or a workplace where there are many people you're not familiar with, or these kind of unfamiliar situations, or maybe going into the forest, a forest or a mountain top that you've never been to before. There may be these situations on the outside that are less peaceful, safe, secure. Maybe in a city, a place where there's lots of people, or something happens and people are running or shouting, or there's loud music or loud noises from different things. There may be those occasions where we're surrounded by noise and disturbance and even possible threats. But we can still find this place of inner peace and really value it at those times when out on the outside things are not safe, secure, peaceful. When we're at home, sometimes we, because it is a fairly safe environment, normally speaking, and then if we also practice mindfulness and find some inner peace from our practice of meditation, listening to the Dhamma, chanting, probably one of the dangers then is not a danger of some kind of threat, but it's more the danger of complacency. So many people who practice meditation at home find one of their biggest obstacles is sleepiness. Because they feel comfortable, not threatened, safe, well then the mind kind of relaxes so much it's easy just to fall asleep. And many meditators complain of this problem. When we practice at home, it's so comfortable, so safe, the mind just wants to quietly fade into bhavanga, go into a state where there's no knowing, no mindfulness. So sometimes it's actually good to go to a place where your anxiety or your fear is stimulated a little bit, within reason. You don't want to take on too much too soon, but that is why sometimes it's good to go out of the house to a place that's not so familiar to you. Maybe not a place that's very busy or noisy, but if it's a place that's unfamiliar, it can be a good test of our meditation. If you think about it, in life there are many places where you wouldn't normally associate that place with meditation or Buddhist practice, but it may be a good place to practice because it's a place where you can test yourself. Because to really develop this safe, secure refuge of the Dhamma on the inside, in your heart, it has to be strong and well developed so that wherever you go, whatever you're doing, it's maintained, or your mind is maintaining contact with the Dhamma. Because the world is a challenging place to live, and it's very easy to forget the Dhamma, become unmindful, forget the Buddha, become distracted. So sometimes meditators do go out to places just to test their practice and see what's going on in their mind, and they don't always feel they have to control conditions and be just in the safest, securest place like home. You take your practice with you wherever you go. So this is the tradition of the wandering Buddhist monks from the time of the Buddha, what we call forest monks, Tudong monks, where sometimes monks will leave their monastery, which can become a bit like a home, where you're feeling very kind of secure and familiar on familiar grounds, where they go off into the forests, cremation grounds, mountain tops, caves, quiet places, to test out their practice and to really focus on their mind and developing this internal refuge of Dhamma. And that's where you really see the value of it, because if you're in a lonely place on your own, or maybe with some fellow practitioners, but you're all in that lonely place, you're tested because you have nothing else to rely on or depend on. Same in a way when you come on meditation retreat as a layperson. You might leave the comfort and security of your own home and you go to stay in a retreat center or a monastery. One of the first things you have to deal with is your own anxiety. Is what will I do for food? In a monastery you don't pay for your food, and you don't have your own supply, your own fridge or store of food. You give up a lot of that familiarity and security to trust in the monastery or the retreat center, wherever it is you're going to stay. But you still have to deal with a bit of that anxiety. So anxiety about food. Will I get enough food tomorrow? Who will cook it? Will it be food I can eat? You have anxiety maybe about sleep and how much sleep you'll get and where you'll sleep. Will I get my own room? Bedding, if you didn't bring your bedding, will I get a pillow that I like, or a mattress that I like, that I feel comfortable with? Or people even. You go on retreat, you give up your security in the sense you're just mixing with people, many of them who you don't know, and you trust that they're there with the same good intention, but you don't know them. People have different habits. Some people snore when they sleep, some people sleep a lot, some people sleep little, some people talk a lot, some people talk little. All kinds of things that will bring up anxiety, worry, especially the first day of a retreat or the first day in a monastery. So all of these are good opportunities to really understand the power and the value of Dhamma, where you come out of your comfort zone a little bit. Even when we are living at home, we can still have those opportunities. So you go to work and you have to engage with new people or learn new tasks. You may have similar moments of anxiety, doubt, fear. But particularly when you come into a monastery or on retreat, you'll see it. You'll see your former clinging to habits of comfort and convenience that you had when you were at home, and then you have to shed them or give them up when you come into the monastery. So I remember when I first went to stay in the monastery in Thailand, Wat Panana Chat, Ajahn Chah's monastery that he set up for the foreign Sangha. I went there. I had no experience of living in a monastery prior to that. I'd visited monasteries, but hadn't actually stayed overnight or given up my freedoms and my security to go and live in a monastery. So I remember the first day I was wondering, how will I cope sleeping on a mat on the floor in the forest, in the jungle? And what will I do for food tomorrow? Can I eat the Thai food? Will there be enough? But luckily, because I was there to practice, I had some faith established already. I quickly worked through those kind of anxieties. Simply by receiving the food the next day, eating it, I realized, I can survive. And then getting up, doing the morning meditation and chanting, I could survive. Going through the daily routine of the monastery, I very quickly, just within a day or two, I realized, I'll be able to survive this. It's not that difficult, not that hard. So a lot of anxiety dropped away. But for those interested in practice, always looking at our mind in this way, looking at where stress, anxiety is coming from, and then looking to see where we can understand it and go beyond it and bring the mind closer to the Dhamma, which is what most people find through practicing is what brings you beyond your stress, your anxiety. But there's that period where you haven't done it yet. Your mind is not yet always seeing and understanding the Dhamma. It's not always mindful, not always clear. And even if you have some faith and trust in a teacher or the Buddha, there's this transition period where you are beginning practice, but you haven't yet fully understood how to look after your mind. So then your mind is still prey to nervousness, anxiety, worry. And so we need also a lot of patience, kindness, goodwill for ourselves, and patience. So every teacher in the Buddhist tradition, or almost every teacher, will remind you to be patient with those feelings of anxiety, nervousness that come up as you're practicing. A big part of our practice, from start to finish, is not, the practice of patience is not something you just do for a short while in the beginning and then give up because you don't need it anymore. You need it all the way through your life in the practice. Whether you're a new monk or a new layperson practicing Buddhism, patience will help you to deal with some of the stresses and anxieties that you start to uncover through the practice as you're inclining more towards the Dhamma, but you haven't quite yet reached the Dhamma. You haven't quite yet seen the truth or understood the truth about your own mind yet. Well, you need some patience to deal with your own feelings, emotions, thoughts, and pain in the body, mental pain as well. So that transition period, as you're learning how to practice and learning to go deeper into your practice, you need to rely on patience. Some physical patience and endurance, and then mental patience, dealing with things. And something that helps you, to have patience is you understand why you're practicing patience with a feeling of anxiety or worry. Why should I be patient with that? Before we practiced the Dhamma, in the old days maybe, perhaps we didn't bother being patient with things. If we felt anxious, we'd do something to get rid of it very quickly, like drink a beer or take a pill or watch a movie or listen to music or talk to our friend or just go to sleep and try and escape. We tend to, the more easy, more habitual way when we face any feelings of stress, anxiety, is just to escape from them, get out of them very quickly, get away from them, but without really understanding them or understanding how to deal with them wisely, not becoming mindful, not developing much insight. We tend to just run away from them. And that tends to be our experience with stress, suffering. In the beginning of our practice, we'll notice we don't really want to be with suffering or learn from it or understand from it. We just want to run away from it, avoid it. And in a sense, that sounds correct, of course. We want to avoid suffering, we don't want suffering. But the Buddha's way was one of, you might say, of maturity, bringing the mind to really find a secure inner refuge. We also have to be willing to look at stress, suffering for what it is. But often we find very quickly we can gain some peace and understanding doing this, because a lot of our stress, anxiety in life is just self-created reactions, you might say negative or unskillful reactions to very ordinary experiences where we let our mind run with a certain train of thought that comes up, takes over the mind, and we get caught into that feeling of anxiety and the thoughts that accompany it. And if we're not establishing mindfulness or investigating it, well, it wins. It wins over us and we just become nervous, anxious, fearful, worried, whatever it may be. The stress seems to take over and we become it. We become stressed, we become our suffering at that point, which is a shame. But when we practice mindfulness and we bring up mindfulness with patience, and we're willing to be patient because we have a higher goal in mind and we can see it's a useful tool perhaps to get to that goal, then we find a lot of these stressful feelings, anxious, nervous feelings and thoughts dissipate quite quickly. What seemed to be very real and very strong emotion or very powerful emotion sometimes, and seem to be very real and something very important in the mind because of our previous habit of identifying with such a feeling, such a thought, seeing it as me, who I am, I'm stressed, I'm anxious, I'm uncomfortable. Suddenly that whole way of looking at things shifts a bit, and with bringing up mindfulness, coming back to the breath, slowing the mind down, allowing the mind to slow down a bit, allow the thoughts to dissipate a bit, we might find that a feeling of tiredness or stress or worry, anxiety wasn't nearly as important as I thought it was, wasn't nearly as powerful an influence on my mind as I thought it was. It's just thoughts, it's just feelings. We say just or only thoughts, only feelings, and these thoughts, feelings arise, they pass away. They are just what they are. They're just, we say, like waves on the ocean. And the kind of understanding that arises from seeing that is what we call seeing the Dhamma, bringing the mind to see the truth. And that's what we call a secure, safe refuge, where you know things as they are. It may not yet remove feelings of stress that are coming up, feelings of pain in the body or tiredness, some kinds of suffering. We can't just wave a magic wand and get rid of them. We can distract ourselves from them in the old way, the old habit, following the old habit perhaps. But when you're practicing mindfulness, you have to accept there will be some stress and painful feelings that you're observing, and it won't just disappear. But what changes is your attitude. This deeper inner knowing becomes more prominent in your awareness. So this is like going down more into the depths of the ocean rather than getting caught up in the waves and the surf on the top of the ocean. You're going down to a deeper level where there's more stability, clarity. And this is like the mind going to that safe, secure refuge of the Dhamma inside, where you're knowing things, but this quality of knowing is not so easily shaken, it's not so easily disturbed, not so easily fooled by all these thoughts, nervous thoughts and feelings rushing around on the surface of our mind. So the Buddha said it's like, digging a well into the ground to get water. You have trust that the water's there, because maybe an expert or somebody else who's very good at finding water has said there will be water there. We found it nearby, so there will be water if you dig. That's like your trust in the Buddha and your teachers who have said, well, if you do develop this inner knowing, you will find deeper peace, deeper, more satisfying kind of understanding. You will find it, but you have to be willing to dig down to get to it. You have to be willing to dig the well. If you give up, well, you'll never reach it. You can complain that the water is too far down, you just don't have the qualities, the effort, the energy, the patience to get to it. But really that's something you can remedy. You can't remedy the depths of the water, but the fact that water is there is where you have, your positive energy comes from. You have hope, you have faith, the inspiration that, if I only keep going, I will find this inner security or find the water down in the ground. I just have to keep going patiently with effort, developing the mindfulness, the wisdom, or in the case of the water, digging. You have to keep digging, but if you don't stop, sooner or later you're going to strike water. Dhamma practice is a bit like that. You have to trust in the Buddha and the Dhamma and the Sangha, and then you're turning your attention inwards into the heart to develop this quality of knowing things the way they are, rather than always caught up in every next thought, every next feeling, every next emotional change in the landscape of your mind. So the practice of patience, patient effort, mindfulness, and then wise reflection on what's going on will always bear fruit, and sometimes quite quickly. Where you were believing in a certain kind of anxiety or fear before, suddenly you might have a breakthrough and you realize it was just a thought. It's not as bad as I thought. Sometimes when we meditate, we do have to pause and just remind ourselves of these truths. Part of meditation is wise reflection, and you have to remind yourself of things that have happened in the past. So say you're meditating and you feel stressed, angry about something, worried about something. Well, just stop and ask yourself, well, have I had these kind of thoughts before? You probably, especially if you have already been practicing meditation in the past, but probably you can remember times where you felt this way before, and then you can say, well, in the past it arose, it passed away, it disappeared. This feeling that I'm experiencing now, this train of thought that's bothering me, disturbing me, will also arise, pass away, and be gone. Just as it has done in the past, it will now. And maybe even in the future there'll be other times where stress, anxiety arises as an experience, but it will also pass away because we've seen it in the past do that. We're seeing it right now, arise, pass away. Well, it will carry on doing that in the future because that's the way this mind operates. Feelings are just feelings. Thought formations, sankharas, are just thought formations, sankharas. Memory is just memory, perceptions, just perceptions. We can learn in that way by a bit of wise reflection, sometimes reminding ourselves why it's worth being patient, putting effort in, because this is bringing the mind to liberate the mind and experience this deeper sense of security and safety, which is what we all aspire to and wish for in this, especially in this world full of chaos. If you just keep going, then you'll gain something from this practice. A very simple maxim to follow in your practice, not to give up, just keep going. But we use wisdom with mindfulness and effort and patience, and sometimes wisdom has to guide our practice to remind ourselves, I've seen this formation in my mind before, this way of thinking, it's come up before. Maybe it's like an old friend or an old enemy, and it's like, I get stuck in this way of thinking so many times. But at the same time, you can say, but it just, in the past, it's always just arisen, passed away. It's not like it's there all the time. It comes, it goes. So now if I'm experiencing a certain anxiety or nervousness, I can also say, well, this also will pass. This too will pass. Seeing the impermanent nature of the different disturbances, worries that come up, anxiety, states of sleepiness, tiredness that are bothering you, seeing how they come and go, arise and pass away, is deepening our wisdom, bringing our mind to that inner place of Dhamma, and knowing, in the end, this arises, this passes away. What arises and passes away is not anything permanent. It's not a permanent self. Sometimes we get a little bit confused because as we're meditating, we're observing body and mind, and we say, I know there's a body here because I can see it, I can feel it, sense it. Thoughts arise, pass away. I can see them arise, pass away. So when the Buddha said everything is not self, what does that mean? Because I can experience these things, but if they're not self, what does that mean? Well, you could say that you have a self, it's just your self is not permanent. If you want an easy way to describe your experience as a human being, you say, well, there's somebody here, there's me, this human being, but it's not permanent, it's changing. And we use that insight to our advantage, because especially when we do have painful feelings, or we feel tired, or we have stress arising in one way or another, we can stop, establish mindfulness, maybe go back to the breath and say, this too will pass, it's arising, passing away, and what arises and passing away is not a permanent self, it's not anything, it's not the true essence of this person sitting here. These are temporary experiences of mind. And that can be very liberating. It allows the mind to let go, to come back to the place of ease, security, because we know what arises must cease. It's not a permanent state of existence. It's not a permanent me. It's not something I have to take ownership of in that way. We have to accept responsibility for our past actions. So the stress, much of the stress and anxiety we experience, we've created in the past through our own actions, our own clinging, but it arises and passes away. It's not a permanent self. It's not always going to be like this. It's a delusion, isn't it? When you are stressed, you tend to think, my life is no good. When you're depressed, you feel very negative. My life is no good. Everything is no good. My job, my relationship, my health, everything is no good. It's always going to be like this. What's the point of living? When we get very negative, we tend to put this sense of a fixed view on things. Oh, this is the way it is. It's always going to be like this. This is me. This is who I am. But a simple practice of mindfulness of breathing, coupled with some investigation of Dhamma, reflecting on impermanence, will quickly break through that false identity that we've assumed, a false belief in a sort of permanent self who is depressed or unlucky, unfortunate, hopeless, failure. Whatever it is that we've got caught into, it will start to expose that as just a false view attaching to thoughts that are actually arising, passing away. And the quicker we see the true nature of things, the quicker we let go. And the quicker the mind returns to a place of peace, spaciousness, where it's knowing but not clinging to those negative thoughts or the fears, the worries. So the flavor of our practice, or the way we're practicing, is we're aiming to find this inner place of security and safety that is going beyond the external conditions, even dealing with our own karma, our own emotions and attachments that come up, learning to find a safe, secure refuge from them, from our past, and as we deal with our own past karma, but also this safe, secure refuge from the chaos and the ups and downs and the difficulties of life in general. People around us, the world, all kinds of forces and conditions that we can't control. It's grounding us in Dhamma, in reality, insight, when we practice in this way. And hopefully you find as you continue to practice, then this sense of inner security grows. And of course that's a form of happiness. At first it might not seem like that, but if you're more aware of the truth, you're able to bring your mind to the present moment and witness the arising and passing away of thoughts and emotions, feelings in the body, mental states, physical states. If you're witnessing the arising, passing away of these things, then you feel more at ease within yourself, because you know that's the way things are. Your mind is seeing the Dhamma, seeing the truth. If you see the way things are, you're not being fooled, you're not being tricked by them, your mind can be at ease, even in the midst of very disturbing situations or challenging situations. We know, that's the way things are. So this is what the Buddha was encouraging us to develop, the inner refuge, the inner place of safety and security. And that is something that's a choice. It is more under our control, but it's something we have to develop. We have to put effort into it. The Buddha always reminded his students, I'm only able to point the way. show you the way. I can't practice for you. And we have to remember that. Our tendency when we are stressed, anxious, nervous, afraid is to always seek some external being or force, hopefully to put our hope in and ask for a blessing or protection from it. May the Buddha protect me, may God protect me, may the gods, the devas protect me, may the great universal oneness protect me, whatever. We tend to do this rather than going back into our mind to really look and understand cause and effect and understanding where suffering comes from. The easy way out is put all our faith and belief in something external. But that's, maybe temporarily that can support us and make us feel better. But in the long run, it's not going to work because, one, we often put our faith and belief in things that either don't exist or don't exist in the way we understand, or they can't help us anyway, even if they do exist. I mean, we can say, well, there was a historical Buddha, and we have faith, we trust that there was a Buddha, and the Dhamma, his teachings are still here. But the Buddha was only pointing the way. We have to take the Dhamma teachings and learn from them with our own experience. The Buddha can't do it for us. The gods, the devas can't do it for us. So we have to watch that tendency, isn't it? When you're stressed, you're anxious. Like when I was when I was young, I remember when I first got what we called a stereo. You play record players. When I was about 11, I got my first record player, play LP records back in the 1970s, and then one day it broke. I remember I was 11, I was going, if there is a God, may I be able to fix this machine. Of course, just praying to God, wishing for God or Buddha or whoever to fix your record player isn't enough. You have to take it out. Either you fix it yourself with the tools and some information, or you take it to the guy who repairs it, which is what I did. So the repairman became God. We tend to do that when we're stressed, don't we? We look for the easy, quick way. We pray, we ask for help, we want somebody or some superior being to help us, which does uplift us at the time, but it's not the ultimate solution, isn't it? We have to go back into the mind itself and look at cause and effect. The record player is broken, you have to fix it in whatever whatever component of the record player is broken, you have to fix that, repair it or replace it. Whatever part of our mind is broken has to be fixed, and we have to fix it. And we get strength from the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, external sources, teachers. Even, if we did meet a deva, well, maybe we could feel good about that. Maybe get a boost from our practice. When we meditate, and sometimes we share merits with the devas, or we feel the presence of devas maybe in a very holy place. Like you go to Bodh Gaya and you meditate there, you feel, oh, there's so many devas here, and your meditation seems to go well. But ultimately you have to go back into your own mind, don't you? You have to accept the teacher can only point you in the right direction. The Buddha or your teacher points you in that direction. You have to do it yourself. You have to look and keep looking patiently, observing cause and effect, where you're clinging to body, to mind, to these five khandhas, and understanding that when you cling, you'll suffer. When you see the harm of clinging, your mind releases, you start to feel better. Peace emerges. So one who never clings never suffers. As Ajahn Chah used to say, one who clings a lot suffers a lot. One who clings less suffers less. One who doesn't cling at all doesn't suffer at all. And that's the Buddha or an arahant. They just don't bother clinging to that which brings them suffering. They've understood that point very well by going inwards to the Dhamma inside their heart. We still have gratitude to the Buddha, to teachers, to the devas, to all the good forces in the universe, all the people who have helped us, our parents, friends, teachers, true, we have gratitude for them all, but we also have to recognize that ultimately this heart, this mind will improve and develop through going inwards and doing the practice for ourselves. So maybe for today I'll just say this much and end the talk there, but I think we have time for some questions afterwards.